So today we're going to talk about what exactly is a private placement memorandum. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see a little bit about what we're talking about. So what exactly is a private placement memorandum, or a PPM is what it's commonly referred to as. So essentially a private placement memorandum is a disclosure document. Sometimes it's called an offering memorandum. That's what the SEC typically refers to it in Regulation D, some of the rules, an offering memorandum. But a private placement memorandum refers to a disclosure document when you're talking about a private placement of securities, which is when a company goes out and raises capital, or individuals go out and raise capital privately instead of doing like an IPO and raising money publicly. So what's in a private placement memorandum? So there's certain categories that the SEC likes to see or recommends to be in there, but essentially it's a full disclosure about the terms of the investment. So when you're going out and raising capital, you give this to your investors, and it's supposed to give them all of the information they need to know to make an informed investment decision. So it typically covers things like, okay, who are we? So what's the company? What's the background of the company? Was it just formed? Um, and who is the management? Who's controlling, running the company? Who's in charge? And what are we doing? So we're out raising money. We're a company that's brand new, newly formed, and we're raising money to invest in real estate property, let's say. So that's what we're doing. Here's the company. Here's what we're doing. Now, how are we doing it? So this would be like almost an executive summary or a business plan. So we plan to purchase this property. Here's the address. Here's the specifics of the property. And we're going to go out and raise money, and it's go towards developing the property, acquiring it, and then eventually we're going to sell it in 3 to 5 years and make a profit. So what are the terms of the offering? And the offering is basically just, what is the investment? So we're offering you, for $100,000 minimum investment, you can get 2% of the company that's going to own the property. Think of, like, if you've ever seen the show Shark Tank or something like that. I'm offering you, $100,000 to get a 10% stake in my company. It's kind of what it is, essentially. It's like, okay, I'm getting common stock in the company. Here's the percentage I'm getting. There's no guarantee of a return, but here's how a return would be calculated if you do. So you're going to get a distribution of profit at a certain percentage based on how much you invest, or whatever the terms are. And what are the risks of investing? So this is one of the biggest areas of disclosure that the SEC looks at is, did you properly disclose everything that was a risk in investing? So an investor looks through this and reads it and says, okay, you're investing in real estate. What are the risks of investing in real estate? What are the risks of the fact that this is a brand new company that you just formed, or the management doesn't have a lot of experience, or whatever the risks are? You disclose all those things to your investors because the SEC looks at investor protection. Plus, if an investor doesn't get the return they're expecting, this PPM is a disclosure document that helps protect you in court to say, when an investor sues you saying, hey, I didn't get the return you promised me, or you said you were going to do this and you didn't, you did this instead. You have your PPM. You can say, look, here's a copy of what we provided you. Here's exactly what we were going to do, and here were all the risks. You signed off on it, so you knew the risks going in, and you can minimize your exposure in lawsuits. Also, securities disclosures and certain disclaimers that the SEC either requires or likes to see in there about whether it's a restricted security, it's not transferable, the SEC has not basically reviewed the terms of this offering. There's a few things that are normally put in there. Now, when do I need a PPM? So the rules often change when it comes to private placements. For example, a few years ago, Regulation D, that's one of the most common ways to privately raise capital, was recently changed to basically have Rule 506, B and C, which are now the primary exemptions that are used by people raising capital. 506B is an unlimited amount of capital you can raise, and you can raise it from accredited or up to 35 and up to 35 unaccredited investors. If you bring in any unaccredited investors right now under Rule 506B, you're required to provide them an offering memorandum, PPM, prior to them investing so that they've seen it and seen the risks of investing prior to their decision to invest. Most of the times, under the other exemptions, it may not be specifically required. We typically recommend it because if the SEC or a state securities agency ever was to do an investigation of an offering, an investment, it just provides better protection for you for potential disclosure, even if technically it wasn't required. Also, when you're dealing with experienced investors, whether it's an angel investor, you're going out to institutional investors, especially, they're going to pretty much require it. So we recommend it because they're used to seeing them and they want to see them to make sure that you've actually done your homework and that you've thought about all the potential risks, financial projections, a little bit about the company, that they've gotten all their disclosures they want to see. 506C is when you do a public offering, essentially. It's general solicitation and advertising under Regulation D. Doesn't necessarily require an offering memorandum to be disclosed, but if you go out to one of the investor portals that's going to basically blast this on social media for you and promote your offering under 506C, most of them require to have a PPM, and they're going to require you to send it to them and their counsel to review it and sign off on it, or they won't take you on as a client. So most times you're going to need to have a PPM, even if it's not technically required under the current SEC rules. Now, also required by certain investment groups like angel investors, venture capital, in some cases. How do you get a PPM? So one of the worst mistakes you can do is copy someone else's. You can go online, you can get a template, and you can copy somebody else's. However, I can't tell you how many times I've had clients come to me and say, well, on the last time I did this, I just found a sample online. And I look at it, the rules change when it comes to securities regulations on what's required. And you look at it and it's like, no, this isn't compliant. It's not up to date. You could not only be in trouble with a regulatory agency, this brings the potential for investor lawsuits, just because you're trying to save a little money. So I always recommend that you go to an experienced securities attorney who is up to date on the current versions of securities law when it comes to private placements. And they can help you draft the private placement memorandum with the required disclosures and also review investor presentations. Make sure you're not saying things that you shouldn't be saying that are going to get you into trouble. So that's just kind of a general overview of PPMs, and I have other videos that go into other areas in more detail.